Greetings and welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dive videos, I'm going to explore the arrival of the nodal axis on the 17th of July, the true nodes, into the sign of Aries, north, and Libra, south. This is a really, truly exciting event, and it's going to have a massive impact over the next 18 months. They haven't been in these signs for the last 17 years, so I just want to go through exactly what we can expect, but also because we need to take into account exactly the point when this process begins, the event chart, and that's really influenced by the planet of hidden truths, Pluto, power, but also transformation, but not in a particularly easy way. So a massive time for person-kind. I'm going to just be going into what are the nodes, what are the timings, when will this go on to, what's the mythology behind this, and how do they work, how do they impact in our situation. What's the difference between the collective position of the nodes and where they are in our natal charts? That's really important too. And I will be looking at the event chart in terms of the solar event, taking the first degree of Aries, the vernal point, as a collective chart for us all, which puts them in houses 1 and 7, but also the natal chart puts them in houses 2 and 8, very much to do with our sense of values, everyday money, but also how we interact with one another in the most invested of ways. Then I'm going to go through each of the 12 zodiac signs to give you a flavour of what you can expect in terms of your sun, your ascendant, or your natal node position over this next 18 months. If you're new to my channel, I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. This is very much a community, so please share any thoughts you have. I try to interact with as many as possible, but your support means everything to me, so please do click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Also, if you'd like to like or share this video, that would be lovely too. I'd like to share with you a very special opportunity. This year is absolutely racing by, and year 2024 is speeding towards us. However, if you order your year 2024 personal horoscope forecast now, based on your unique birth data, I will prepare for you the rest of year 2023 free of charge. But also within my package of 30% off, you can get your character analysis report, your life roadmap. This helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your journey so far. Some of these definitely give us opportunities, but others can be more challenging, and a more intimate understanding of these helps us to seize our potential more firmly. Please see the link beneath this video for more on this unique opportunity. I'd just like to clarify a technical issue. If you watch a video or read anyone saying about the nodal axis switching on the 12th of July, they're referring to the median node, which is an estimated position, the true north node, 17th of July. What are the nodes? Well, it's the point at which the paths of the sun and the moon cross. If we think about the sun, it's very much to do with our outer world, our more exterior journey. The moon's much more to do with our inner world of protectiveness, nurture, receptiveness. So they represent very different polarities. So we could say that the nodes are a symbolic merger between those two very different polarities. Now, in terms of the timings, the nodes take 18 years, 7 months and 9 days to go through their whole journey. So this particular axis hasn't happened for 17 years, and it's going to go on all the way through to the end of January 2025. And this is my proposition. I think that point, when we're getting very, very close to 0 degrees Aries, is going to be the most significant time of this particular transition. It won't be now. And the reason for this is Draconic astrology, based the dragon's head, the dragon's tail, the north node, the south node. We moved the north node to 0 degrees Aries, and this gives us our soul chart. So in late January 2025, we're getting to a place where it can be a complete new illumination for personkind. And one of the reasons for that is that Saturn, Neptune and Uranus are all going to be moving that year. Saturn and Neptune into Aries, new beginnings, and Uranus moving into Gemini, very much about quick moving communication, electric energy. So that's going to be the pivotal time, not quite now. And part of the reason why I believe that passionately is that as this event occurs, so Pluto, the planet of hidden truths, but power and transformation, is forging a very tough right angle to the polarities of the North Node just in Aries and the South Node just in Libra. So Pluto is going to be an inhibiting factor, I feel. I don't feel that things will flow in the way that some people are saying. Now, if you'd like to understand a lot more about Draconic astrology, it's something I'm fiercely passionate about. Essentially what happens when the North Node is moved back to the vernal point, if you're someone whose birth chart has the North Node late in Pisces or early in Aries, it's not going to make any difference to your chart, to be honest. But one of the arguments would be that when you came into this world, you came in with a real purity and maybe didn't come in with so much of a karmic past. Because the South Node's very much, if you believe in karma, where we're coming from. The North Node is where we need to evolve to. So for example, in my natal chart, the North Node is in the sign of Scorpio, which is very much about deep spiritual and emotional and psychological discovery. But the first house is very much about being an individual. The South Node's in the 7th house of being in touch with nurturing relationships. So my journey is to stand in my power and develop as an individual, however challenging that may have been. So for example, if you're somebody whose node is not early in Aries or late in Pisces, your chart will change quite considerably. Now in my case, I have the sun in Aquarius. In my Draconic chart, it's in Gemini. It still stays in the same house. So for me, the 3rd house, very much a writer, broadcaster, and so on, videos. But also Mercury, the planet of communication, in my natal chart is in the business-like Capricorn, but it's actually in Gemini in my Draconic chart. Also, my moon's in Aquarius, but in Draconic it's in Cancer. The midpoint between my sun and the moon in my Draconic chart is 0 degrees Cancer. And I think people who know me see me very much as a Cancerian, home-loving, very much into my friends and family. People and relationships mean a lot to me, very caring, I hope. Whereas the natal chart says I'm much more detached, much more Aquarius, much more into new and innovative ideas. That might be true, but I'm certainly very much a home lover. So if you would like to discover more about your Draconic situation, you can order your Draconic natal chart from me by seeing the link below, and you can get 10% off by entering this code DRACO, D-R-A-C-O 10. I'll put that underneath the video as well. But Draconic astrology opens up a vast plane of seeing things in a different way. Now the natal chart still is so important because that's very much about what our potential is in this lifetime. What the Draconic chart tells us about our soul instincts as we came into this life and how we're likely to respond to things in a more feeling way. So it's an incredibly exciting concept. But what about this particular transition? Well, from July the 17th forward, you could argue, because Aries is that beginning point of the whole cycle, that we're on a new mission. And one of the things that perhaps we're being encouraged to do over the next year and a half is understand a lot to do between the toggle between how we connect and collaborate and how we need to develop our own individuality, because Aries is about being true to ourselves as individual. It's about being in the moment. It's about initiating things. And if there are toxic relationships in our lives, I think they're going to come under pressure over this next year and a half, because what the node in Aries is asking us all to do is to work on developing our individual qualities and talents, and therefore our independence. So breaking away from dependent relationships that are not very healthy. But there's nothing wrong with working hard at the relationships that are interactive and supportive. And that's very, very key to express. But certainly, the great thing about Aries is it's very much instinctive. So it's about getting in touch with where we get an impulse and just going for it and showing self-confidence. But I don't feel that that balance between the give and get, that midpoint between what we give to others and what we want to give back and what they give to us and want back from us, that pivot point is not that easy to find. But there is a fascinating part of this particular event, because when we get round to the solar eclipse, which occurs in October on the 14th in Libra, it is going to be very close to the South Node. So we do have an opportunity to bring new ways of working, new collaborative ways of working into our situations. But I don't feel the benefits of Aries are going to be felt straight away because of the role of Pluto. So we can say the nodes, South Node, is what we sow. The North Node, our direction of travel, what we reap. And for me, I'm going to share with you now on the screen the solar event chart, and you can see that the axis is between Aries and Libra, is across the 1st and the 7th houses, but there is Pluto at 29 degrees and 13 minutes in the 10th house, and that's very much to do with authority. So whichever way we're going in terms of trying to express our individuality, trying to balance our relationships, we're dealing with the reality of the world as it is, and that world is very materialistic, and it is very Plutonian in that materialism, because obviously big institutions and big business and corporations want to have more and more information about us, because that's how they monetize from us. But the problem is that that threatens our very individual existence, the node in Aries, if we think about it. So we need to push back and make sure that we're not getting too seduced by all the different technologies that develop, and that we don't lose sight of how good it feels to be innovative and fresh and have a spark, which is very much that Aries in North Node energy. So that's going to evolve over the next year and a half. But let's look at the event chart from a natal perspective. So the thing that's really interesting with this is the North Node is in the 2nd house, which is, of course, very much to do with everyday money, but also self-worth. The South is in the 8th house, how we used to be about resources. So indulging, but perhaps not necessarily being so conscious of the impact that would have. So if we blend the Aries energy of being in the moment and start to work with the resources we have in a better way in the here and now, that can start to have an impact on the resources that we're using that we can never replenish and replace, which is, obviously a lot of earthly resources. Now, in terms of Pluto, there you can see it's in house 1 in the natal chart, based on Placidus and based on this event in terms of universal central time. So I feel that this new reality that's going to be evolving is not just about embracing the Aries energy as an individual, it's also about embracing the new reality around finance. And Pluto in the first house may be very much about our desire to have power over our situations, but I think the reality is the solar chart is really the key with Pluto in the 10th, because that is how it is. You know, we're not necessarily people who can control our entire circumstances. There are things in play to do with technology, robotics, artificial intelligence, that are having or are about to have a massive impact on our ability to earn money in the way we have in the past. And we've gone through lots of technological changes anyway, but this one does seem to be that much more potentially challenging to our identity, which is Aries. And I think it's all going to come up to the boil in 2025 as the North Node gets to the end of Aries, because it gets to its Draconic point, or the Draconic point for person kind. Then with Saturn and Neptune moving out of Pisces into Aries, the new start, and Uranus moving into Gemini, you can see that year 2025, almost right from the off, is going to be quite a year for us all. I think we'll have a lot more understanding of just how incredibly changing the world is and at what pace. Now, please stay with me for each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, and I'll give you a flavour of what you can expect in terms of your North Node through the next 18 months. So Aries, what will the next year and a half hold for your sign? If you watched my year 2023 forecast for you, I did predict that there would be some new beginnings, but also there would be some things coming to an end, and some of those things could occur in quite a crunching and not necessarily easy way. And the whole thing about your sign, it is about initiation. You're most excited when you're involved, really involved at the nub of things, and not just a contributing person. If you're really at the heart of things, that gets your passion stirred. And I feel that if you are born, say a March-born Aries, that this change can almost instantly be positive for you. If your birthday is more towards the sign of Taurus, I think it's possible that initially you could experience a sense of resistance. There may be something that you want to start afresh. There may be something or someone who's really exciting you. It's just it could seem that your circumstances, your work, or people who you feel hold some kind of power or authority over you, they could be very resistant to you wanting to embrace a more individualistic approach. This could even show up in a romantic situation. It doesn't necessarily mean the relationship is going to end. For example, if you've got a very solid job and earn decent money, but you're just not getting much out of it, if you do something that is more entrepreneurial or creative, your partner or your parents may fear that you're not really staying rooted in reality, whereas your sense may be that you're just not feeling a sense of satisfaction. So some kind of new beginning is possible for you Aries over the next year and a half, depending on where you're born within your sign, is going to indicate much to do with the timing of this. But it is important to understand the politics of Pluto. Pluto, in its right angle to both the north in your sign and the south in Libra, is saying to you that you can sacrifice your desire to do something different, fresh and new, if you don't want to rock the boat, but just be aware you may not end up so fulfilled, but you may maintain the financial stability in your situation. And also, if status is important to you, that may be a consideration. But if you're someone who's really been yearning to do something that really gives you a sense of excitement and freshness and verve, the next year and a half is going to be incredibly exciting, but it will require you to step outside your comfort zone in order to seize the opportunity. So Taurus, how will the North Node moving into your 12th solar house impact on you? Well, at the present time, it may not be particularly obvious. Jupiter in your sign is giving you an enormous amount of verve, optimism, and the desire for expansion. And Uranus, which has been a restless but provocative influence, is certainly giving you some nefarious thrills when you have tried some different things. So at the present time, there is a sense of sparkle around you. It's just that Chiron, the wounded healer, has actually been in your 12th house since 2018. And this retrograding North Node will come into an exact conjunction with Chiron in the third week of February 2024. And I assure you, by then, you will be much more conscious of what the North Node is going to represent for you. Because however much Jupiter and Uranus are asking you to manifest your individuality, they're asking you to do it in a way which is joined up with the more psychological, spiritual, and shadow side even of your nature. So integrating your soul purpose with your physical actions is going to be the key to the next year and a half. And if you are someone who does have some past pain or past issues that have not been fully reconciled, this actually is an enormous opportunity for growth, but it just may not be growth in so much of a tangible way. So if you're someone who's trying something that's very enterprising at the moment and pitching in and giving it all, that's absolutely fantastic and really credible. But the important thing, remember, the moon is exalted in your sign. So the moon in Taurus is the second most influential position for the moon to be. So your appreciation of security, your environment, is very strong. But if there is some psychological edges around your situation that you haven't quite come to terms with, that is what you're given an opportunity to dive in and swim around and get more at ease with over this next 18-month period. So Gemini, the move of the North Node, particularly into your 11th house, this is the sector of the collective. You may have been going through some quite deep transitions around some of your friendships and associations since 2018, as Chiron has made its way through your 11th house. But I feel, particularly with the solar eclipse that occurred earlier this year, there is some kind of refreshment going on, and your associations not only have to be fun and uplifting, as they often need to be for you, they need to have some kind of extra depth and dimension to them. So you could find yourself being drawn more and more towards people who have great psychological understanding, even people who are very much into personal development or transformation of any kind. You may even start to think more seriously about property in a way because of the role of Pluto as this event begins. So your long-term future, the 11th house that the node is moving into, needs to be something that really fits your higher purpose. We can all have a desire to have fun, to socialise, to have joyfulness. That's very 5th house. The 11th house is asking us to aspire to something that's even more intangible in a way. It's almost like our higher calling. So over the next year and a half, if some parts of your existence do change, or some people in your friendship group, or some close alliances, I think it is driven because you need to get to a place where you feel the real sweet spot of your reason for being here and your reason for doing what you do. But because of the role of Pluto applying to both the North and the South node position, and that's in a very powerful 8th house position, that could mean that some things do need to make way. And that could be around a romantic relationship, it could be around that friendship group, because you're needing or going to be compelled towards something that, as I said, may not be something that is easy to write down or explain, but it's just a feeling within you that there's something more that you can attain, but it's not necessarily in the material world. So Cancer, you may already be in a role of leadership, supervision or authority. But if you're not really feeling it at the moment, the next year and a half could be a time when you do shake things up and even make some changes. And if you're someone, on the other hand, who has played a more traditional role that Cancers are often associated with, which is something that you probably know I have a frustration with, because I think there's so much more from you. You know, you are a leader sign, along with Aries, Libra and Capricorn, a cardinal sign. You have vast qualities and your tenacity is often underestimated. It's just your tactics aren't necessarily particularly public in the way you go about things. But you could find yourself coming much more into vogue over this next year and a half and taking on more responsibilities, but particularly where it feels really positive. So it doesn't necessarily have to be linked to a career, for example. Maybe you have a passion around a charity or a community situation, and you're going to dedicate yourself to raising their profile and seeing that develop in a positive way. But it could be, if you really do want to gain much greater recognition, then your opportunity to leverage your talents is definitely going to be emphasized and given extra support during this time. So that's really exciting. It's just the South Node saying to you that all the things that you're intrinsically linked with, feeling comfortable in your environment, wanting to feel safe, wanting to nurture and feel nurtured, they're still going to be important. But if those are strong with you, this gives you this window of opportunity in the next year and a half, a marvelous chance to really shine, rejuvenate, or completely change the job or role you're in at the present time. So Leo, the North Node moving into the ninth house. The ninth house is very much about higher truths. It can be about travel, higher education, variety, spontaneity, adventurism, independence. But the North Node is about instincts. If your instinct is that you feel locked in some kind of way, and since 2008, Pluto has been making you uber aware of your responsibilities and obligations. More recently, Uranus in the last few years has perhaps made you more experimental around your work. But I feel that having the North Node in your sister fire sign just aligns your energy in a way which can be good for a fixed sign like yours, that despite being ruled by the sun and being a fire sign and seen as being very charismatic and noble, sometimes you do find it a little bit difficult to get things moving that might be a bit different. So I think what the North Node can do is pull you, even if it's not terribly tangibly obvious, towards something that helps you to see what your higher truth is. We can see the politicians telling the tales that they do, and we see that they're not being truthful, and we see a lot of public figures that get uncovered for the scandals they're involved with, and it is very dispiriting. But whatever we do in life, there is a relationship we have with ourselves, and that's the most important relationship. And even if we're good people and we work hard and we're decent to the people we love, there's still an opportunity for us to connect with something that's more about our journey in life. And the ninth house is very much about journeys. So if you're someone who's never really travelled, or never got to grips with a foreign language, or learnt an instrument, or gone to university, or studied any kind of philosophies, the next year and a half gives you a fantastic chance to do any of these. It's all down to you. So Virgo, as the North Node makes its way into Aries, let's just think about where other planetary influences are in your situation, not least your ruler, Mercury. That's tucked away in a very psychological area, along with Venus, the planet of relating, giving you a lot of food for thought and urging you really to embrace the more psychological side of understanding your involvements with others. Saturn, the planet of limitation, in your opposite sign, relationships, along with Neptune, very much to do with dreamy hopes and sometimes rather crushing disappointments. So the North Node going into the 8th house is where we go through transitions in our life in quite a powerful way. It's very scorpionic. So don't be surprised if you're drawn towards mysteries or unlocking them or getting a much deeper understanding of what makes you or others tick over the next year and a half. But I think around relationships particularly, I feel that you're entering a time when things take on a more charged, intense vibe. That could be exciting, it could be challenging. Let's say, for example, you're single. The movement of the North Node into this area is certainly going to give you an appreciation of security around your longer term finances. That's the practical dimension. But in a more spiritual way, our connections to others are not just about going through the motions. It's almost like feeling that there is a fated reason to be with whom we're with. And remember, the node is very much about karma. So I feel that you may encounter someone over the next year and a half, or think about an existing involvement, really asking or begging the question, is this really what is meant for me? And, if you're not quite sure by the time that the North Node goes at the end of January, early February 2025 into your 7th house, that could be the end of the process. You may have made your decision and it may be a new beginning around relationships. So I think if you're in one and it's really meaningful, it can get deeper over the next year and a half. If you're not quite sure, you're going to question things in a bigger way over this next 18 months. So Libra, there is a paradox with the North Node moving through your opposite sign in the next year and a half, because Aries is very much about the individual. You're much more about how you can connect to others and find that sweet spot between giving and getting. But I think what Aries energy can do is help you to be that much more assertive about getting what you need. Being a people pleaser is a wonderful thing, but not if we lose our identity. However, if your sun position is right at the end of Libra, just on the cusp of going into Scorpio, I think you may find this event a bit more challenging to begin with, because there's some kind of family or emotional politics that's really influencing your relationships at the moment. Even if you're not in one, it could be your past experiences, or it may be trying to get a clear understanding of your boundaries that's so important for you to work on. And because Venus and Mercury are clustered together in the most sociable part of your situation, Venus being your ruler, that natural side of your nature to connect to people and to be charming and interact very skillfully, that's to the fore. But if you are born towards Scorpio, just be aware that you may have to work quite hard initially to make sure that you're really not letting your boundaries be eroded or your guard down. Now, if you're born more at the start of Libra, I think this provides much more instant opportunities. It's a quincunx, but I feel that you don't necessarily have the baggage, because Pluto is not applying to your position of the sun or ascendant in the same way. Still a bit of a challenge to the position of the node itself, the North Node itself. But what about the South Node in your sign? Well, on the 14th of October, there's going to be a solar eclipse, and the North Node will be opposite, but the South Node will be pretty close to it. So your relationship situation in the last 3 months of this year can be transformed very positively. And this North Node journey over the next year and a half can certainly help. I just think the start point is really asking you just how far you came with all the influence of Pluto over the last 15 years, which has probably had a dramatic impact on family relationships or your relationship with yourself. There probably have been times when you felt profoundly let down by how other people haven't understood just how attentive and supportive you've been. So there's more to learn for us all, Libra ascendant in my case, about trying to find where we can feel authentic in ourselves but respected by others. It's a journey for all people, I think, but because Librans have that natural desire to connect, when it doesn't come back, that can feel a very hollow experience and very empty. So what I feel that Mars is saying is that find your own individuality. Doesn't mean to say you can't continue to collaborate and cooperate, but do focus on your way of relating and make sure it suits you. And then inevitably, if not everybody gets that, that's their choice, but at least you'll be sweet with you. Also, when we get to the third week of February next year, the North Node will connect to Chiron. And if you have experienced some painful times around relationships, I think that could be a moment when you can really come to terms, finally come to terms with some of the travesties as you see them, as you've experienced them, but also relaunch yourself in a way which brings much more fruitful and successful opportunities your way in the future. So Scorpio, would you agree with my analysis that you can be a no-nonsense person? If something doesn't quite feel right, you may assert how you feel about it quite directly. But within that, there may be a tendency to sometimes not see round the side of things. Now, seeing underneath things is never a problem for you. So often you see why people say things and you can decode that and be extraordinarily shrewd. But sometimes it's important to actually see round the side of things, because it's not necessarily about just understanding the way that people might be being crafty or not very honest, not very straightforward, which you may instantly spot. But sometimes by seeing around the side of things, we can then understand more why they may be being like that. So there can be a tendency with you to be black or white. So if something doesn't quite feel right, it can be dismissed, I feel. So one of the challenges over the next year and a half with the North Node going through the 6th house, that's a very practical part of your situation, and it's to do with health, work, diet, life organisation, nutrition, anything to do with refinement. And the 6th house can also be a little bit perfectionist. And the North Node is our kind of instinct of travel. So there may be some new things that people suggest to you, and because it's the 6th house, your reaction might be to dismiss it because you can't quite see the value of it straight away. And that's something, that triggering point is something to try to resist, because sometimes when things have a practical benefit, they can also have a psychological upside. But that's not going to come from the North Node. It's more coming from confronting some of your fears and anxieties from the South Node in Libra. So a chance to refine your world, but it may mean that information is going to come to you that's different. For example, someone may tell you about some information about food or processing food and so forth, and because you can be so no nonsense, important not to immediately put a critique on it that then removes it from your thinking, because it doesn't immediately in your senses feel authentic, but actually there may be some information there that can help you. Also around work, you know, if you're someone who wants to change your job over the next year and a half, some real opportunities could present themselves. And if you're someone who wants to get fitter, certainly by the 3rd week of February next year, I know many of us make those New Year's resolutions, don't we, and routinely fail to keep them going. But I actually feel that you could show people by the latter part of February next year that you're really grappling with something that you may have struggled with for some time. It's not that it's a bad thing, it may be just a bit of a nudge in the right direction. I mean, I'm a terrible one for having late night snacks. And I read the other day that if you have a late night snack after you've eaten or after you've cleaned your teeth, it's not very good because that can create some acids that, blah, blah, blah. Well, I have to tighten up. So those kind of things that might not instantly feel right or genuine, just give them a little bit of space, because you could be surprised by how some small and marginal changes to your situation can actually add up to something quite substantive. So Sagittarius, the next year and a half could be really exciting, because the fifth house, where the North Node arrives in your sister fire sign of Aries, is very much about the things that we sense will give us the greatest uplift and joy, whether it's socializing, whether it's being very creative and artistic, whether it's playing with our children if we have them, or it's having children if we want them, or perhaps even meeting that partner that really brings a magnificent sparkle and joy to our lives. But this transition has to coexist with the role of Saturn and Neptune being in your fourth house. And certainly Saturn in house 4 is a tough nut. It's asking you to be conscious of making sure that your home and emotional world are working efficiently and practically and are grounded. Neptune can be distorting. It can, create some magic at times, but mystery at others. So whilst you go through the process of the North Node going through Aries, I don't necessarily think it's going to be a panacea. So the work still needs to be done at the root of your being. In other words, being in touch with what really makes you tick, having a sense of the emotional security in your life and taking it seriously. Because in the past, you've been someone who's had such a terrific ability to wander, be adventurous and independent. And that's actually been what's, really excited you. And it can do again at the moment with Mercury and Venus in your ninth house. So whatever you feel compelled or drawn towards, do think about it in a practical, emotional way, as well as the potential for joy as well. So for example, if you've got great talents, think through what the reality would be in terms of the amount of time you'd need to spend on them. I'm not trying to be a killjoy, I'm just trying to outline to you the way different elements are manifesting in your situation. There's little doubt that in year 2025 your life is going to change in the most incredible of ways. So this period of time through to then is a little bit of a preparation period for you, but it's one that still can be intriguing and full of possibilities. So Capricorn, with Jupiter more recently, but Uranus for the longer term, and over the last year and a half, the North Node, all in your fifth house, that's really giving you a chance to sparkle. Your sign has a reputation for steadfastness, for being very thorough, for withstanding pressure, for keeping going when other people are wilting under pressure. But the reversal of the North Node into your fourth house is really interesting, because Saturn, your ruler, is accentuating your thinking and making your thinking perhaps a little bit more serious, particularly around close family, maybe siblings, neighbours, your immediate community. There may be some challenges and limitations around those areas, but your consciousness around your connections to others on those daily bases is being turned up to max with the more spiritual dimension of Neptune and by the more real or the more realistic energy of your ruler. So having the North Node going into your sector of home, family, emotion, if you would like to create or live in an environment which is much more peaceful, which is going to give you the chance to feel at ease, maybe closer to nature or to water, or maybe you're going to take on a larger role as a grandparent or a parent, or you're looking after parents who are getting older, all that emotional dimension is going to get more heightened with the North Node going through that area. And it's really interesting because the position of the Libra South Node emphasizes the skill set that you naturally have, the 10th house of being successful, doing well, go in for your goals and ambitions in a very steadfast way. So you're being asked in some ways to show a softer side to your nature. Remember, the moon, which rules the fourth house, is actually not at its best in your zodiac sign, so it's at its weakest point. So sometimes I feel that perhaps in the past you have found it a bit awkward about showing vulnerabilities or responding to other people's sensitivities, because you are someone who takes, you're a leader, you're a cardinal sign, take a lot of responsibility, and you're very pragmatic. So some new avenues of growth can emerge for you over the next 18 months, and with Saturn and Neptune also both moving in year 2025 into this tender area, this is going to be a trend line that's not just for this year and a half. It's going to go on for much longer. Also, in late February next year, there is going to be a link between the North Node and Chiron in your fourth house. If there is some hurt or pain linked to your family, or you didn't feel your mother particularly, or the person who played that role, was as nurturing or as caring as they could have been, you may come to a point of acceptance. It may not necessarily give you complete closure, particularly if someone didn't do what they could have done, but your understanding of why it was will certainly strengthen by that time, and that can help to give you a release too. So Aquarius, I'm going to pose to you a rather philosophical question. Do you sometimes feel unheard? Now, yours is an air sign. The second 10 degrees of Aquarius is co-ruled by Mercury, the planet of communication, and also Mercury is exalted in your sign. The third 10 degrees of your sign is governed by, ruled by Venus, which can be about relating. So why would I be asking, do you sometimes feel unheard? Because if you do, but particularly by neighbours, by a sibling, by those seemingly inconsequential conversations that we have every day, that it feels to you that maybe you're not breaking through. Everyone's so busy these days. Everyone's so preoccupied. Everyone wants to assert an opinion. There's not so much discussion. But the third house is an area of your situation where your nimble mind and your openness to new ideas and innovation, and also because you can see things and express things in a unique way, you may feel that people are resistant to that because they see you as being, rather challenging in some way or another. So it depends on your life experience. But if you do feel unheard, the next year and a half, in fact, for many years to come, once Saturn and Neptune move into your third house in year 2025, your desire to get your point of view across is going to become much stronger. The third house is an interesting part of our zodiac because it can be to do with short journeys, can be to do with text messages, email, technology, communication in a quick, fast-moving way. If you're someone who feels very comfortable with all of that, this can be an enormous window of opportunity. If you're less comfortable with chit-chat, even a bit of gossip, you might surprise yourself that you feel just more compelled to join in with the people that you do encounter. So if you don't feel very heard, I think you're going to be more heard by a year and a half's time, but initially you may feel quite frustrated just how unheard you are feeling, and that will be particularly the case if you're born right at the start of Aquarius, like me. So Pisces, the North Node moving back into your second solar house for the first time in 17 years, is going to be an interesting journey as far as you're concerned in terms of how much you value you. Now, you may have a very robust sense of your self-worth, and if that's the case, that's brilliant. And it's possible, of course, with the North Node that you may find yourself thinking a lot about everyday finance. Not many of us aren't at the moment. But the second house is also to do with foundations. Those foundations can be practical, but they can also be more psychological. So what do you feel that your your world is structured upon? That's the question that really is going to come up strongly in this next year and a half. If you're someone who feels that it is pretty robust, that's brilliant. You know, you can find that your appreciation for what you've got can grow, because the North Node can create a philosophical respect for how it is. But remember, it can also be the direction of travel. So if your situation isn't as strong at the moment and you'd like it to be, the node will help to transform that in a positive way. But one thing I would say to you is, if you're relying on your friendship group, or your circle of involvement, the way you connect more socially to feed some of these core needs, you could be quite disappointed. And that's because of the role of Pluto, which is suppressing the nodal angle. So I feel that you are someone who can be quite whimsical. You're very floaty. You can have different views on the same situation on subsequent days, because you're just influenced greatly by the more spiritual but the more mysterious energies of Neptune, and also the more optimistic but giving and embracing of faith vibe of Jupiter. So you can often try to see the upside of the situations, but I think you're being asked to just really, in a very natural way, see your situation evolve, that gives you more of a sense of that self-worth, of your core values, and if possible, within the mix, improve your financial situation too. So that's the opportunity. And you could find yourself in a surprising way just compelled to do things a little bit differently, that gives you that greater sense of security and firm base camp. And that's really good, and certainly not something you should judge if you find yourself doing that.